All right, and it's now time for Black and White. This is where we talk about matters social. And today we're talking about secrets in death. Now, we've seen this happen time and again, and it's happened quite often where when somebody dies, other people come up and either they claim to be their other wives or children, and it happens time and again. So we'd like to basically just, discuss this and get into the intrigues of this and find out why this happens, and if there's a way that we can avert this, and possibly if there are signs that one can follow. Just a quick reminder that you're welcome to participate in this conversation. We'll have the phone lines open and would like to hear what your take is on this. But let me start by first of all introducing the panel that we have to discuss this, and I'll start with the lady. We have Shiro Ngige, who is a family lawyer. Thank you for joining us, Shiro.
Psychologist.
Okay. We also have Kimenshu Kimathi, who is, she's a psychologist. I beg your pardon. Kimenshu Kimathi, who is a lawyer, and Brian Odongo, who's also a lawyer. Lady and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Now, we did take time to ask Kenyans what they thought about some of the things that may cause this to happen, and would like to listen into what they had to say before we begin the discussion right here in studio.
Sioni usuli wa kwenda kutafuta mipango ya kando. Mipango ya kando ni mbaya sana, sio vizuri unaenda kutafuta. Heli hata mwanaume atembee nje kushinda mwanamke.
As a man unaweza make mistake, ukaza mto nje ya ndoa, but what matters ni own up. Own up mistake yako, take care of the baby plus the mother.
Mpango wa kando kama married woman si poa, juu inaharibu CV ya mtu. Alafu kama mimi ni mama mwenye nimeokoka, mume wangu ni mchungaji. Kwa hivyo I'm not comfortable having another relationship outside my marriage.
Ni vizuri wanaume wafuate dini. Sababu sidhani kwamba ikiwa utakuwa na mtoto nje ya ndoa haitakusaidia chochote, kwa sababu utakuwa umemdhulumu ule mtoto. Kwa sababu haki ni kwamba lazima uwe umeoa katika ndoa. Hii mambo kufuata western haitasaidia.
If I want a mpango wa kando, there's no reason for me to get into a relationship. To drag someone along for absolutely no reason. So just remain single and panga with whoever I want to panga.
Ukiingia kwa relationship, unajua that's like umejibound, like you're only supposed to have one partner.
There's also risk of, transmitting sexually transmitted diseases, which that's a big risk to your family and the people at large in your community.
All right, so varied opinions right there. But let me start with you, Shiro, as a psychologist. What is it that makes us as a society, and we've seen this happen time and again, but what is it that makes us as a society feel so much pressure to hide these relationships, and they only spring up at the point of death?
I think shame. We are a very shame-bound society. We function on shame. To get Kenyans to do things, or to get Africans to live life, the societal education that you're given is one of shame. And so, as you've heard, there's very many Kenyans who are like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And so the response to don't do it in Africa is hide, because if you're not supposed to be doing it, you should be ashamed when you do it. And so people just hide it.
Are we in a way living in denial? Because there's so many cases that keep coming up to a point where one is left thinking, I've heard the narrative that, men by nature are polygamous. That's what they say.
I don't think it's a men by nature are polygamous as much as it is monogamy as we do it today is designed to fail.
Wow, what does that mean?
Okay.
As we do it today. Was it done differently?
No, I don't think there's been a generation in human history, and I'm not saying this because I have answers, but I don't think there's a generation in human history that has quite understood how to do monogamy and do it with honor to both parties. But monogamy as we know it today was wildly designed to fail. It's designed to be a very high pressure environment, and any high pressure environment is going to make at least one person, or the person who has the most pressure, feel the need to rebel.
Okay, Kamenchu, maybe not even from a legal perspective, but from a guy's perspective, do you think? Let me hear.
We're wired polygamous.
Yeah, whether are we wired polygamous, or is monogamy something that is somewhat foreign to a point where we are trying to do? She said the way it is, the way we are doing it today is designed to. It's so high pressure.
Okay. I think, well, the question is not just about marriage. The question is also about our morality, our sexual conduct as far as it goes, because you could find that somebody is actually not married to somebody else, but actually has a child with that person. So you'll find that sometimes that's the context. But specific to the question of monogamy, as far as it goes, we must realize we come at it with a context. We come at it with a context where, first of all, we are coming from an African culture that polygamy was very much part of our reality for many of the communities that are within here. Secondly, you're living in a society where there is a more liberal view towards sex, and as a result of that, you find people engaging in this. So you'd find, for example, even when you're joining university, there was always that story that there's that child that somebody got between high school and university and that kind of thing. So these are some of the realities that we are looking at when we are existing here. But that's aside from the issue of the law, which I'm sure we'll address as we come along.
As we go along. Yeah. Let me get your opening comments, Brian, on your thoughts. And by the way, even when we talk about polygamy, in this day and age, I don't think it's just men who are thought to be polygamous, but even women nowadays have multiple partners.
Yes.
Some of them.
Interestingly, this question has before gone before courts of law in the Republic. And while considering the Kisii culture, a judge of the High Court made a comment that in the event, culturally, a woman takes up a second wife in terms of furthering her union with her husband, because in Kisii culture allows for that. The court says that in fact that woman married as a second wife of the woman is entitled to the property of the woman who brought her into the union upon the death of the woman who brought her into the union. So these are questions that we're interacting with not only culturally, but also in the modern day society that we live in today. Yeah.
Okay, and what is your take now, away from the legal side of it? Are we generally a polygamous society, but maybe living in denial?
I don't think we're living in denial, because the laws as a structure in Kenya recognize the fact that polygamous unions are allowed and are prevalent for that matter.
When I say living in denial, I mean especially from a psychological and societal point of view, because here we are saying that we are monogamous until that day when that other family appears, and unfortunately it seems to happen after death. Shiro?
We are living in denial, but I understand what causes the denial. Because like I said, when you're a shame-prone society, one of the shame works on two things: silence and isolation. For it to thrive, you need silence and isolation. So you need to think that you're the only one who's doing this and you're the only one who's wrong. And then to make it continue, you need to be as quiet about it as possible. And so in such a situation, and we are a culture where we know very many people have children somewhere they're hiding, but somehow we still think it is shameful to talk about the children that you're hiding. But there's so many people who have these children, we might as well just talk about it and let all the children come out in the open. So we are in denial about that. We are in denial about the fact that we have a sense of morality that we imagine we should ascribe to that is not actually who we are.
It's not who we are.
Yeah.
And do you think that form of morality that we think we have is religious or cultural, or both?
It's a combination of it's more political and religious than it is. I don't think culturally African cultures were particularly sticklers for, no, they were shame-prone, but they were not sticklers for monogamy the way we are today. Yeah. I think it is, one, in an economy like ours, monogamy makes sense. Monogamy is social justice in an economy like ours. In capitalism, monogamy is social justice. And then considering how difficult it is to raise children in this economy, monogamy does make sense. And so there's a political aspect to it. And then, of course, there's a religious aspect. And depending, in different societies, depending on how colonialism happened upon them, and hence religion, then it tells you, wait, what happens is how it was introduced to you, then creates how you're going to live your life. So here, it didn't come as a discussion. In a lot of other countries, the Brits actually went as a discussion. And because it was a discussion, you could say yes, you could say no. Here, it was a gun and a Bible. So it was forget everything you are. Like, I've heard stories of people who, when they became Christians, would have to run away at night to go be something else, because you absolutely couldn't be an African and a Christian at the same time.
It was actually a matter of life and death.
Yes, and so our morality has come in a way of isolation in and of itself. And again, back to the point of shame.
Kamenchi, you want to say something?
So I'd just like to pick up on what both Shiro and Brian have stated.
Yeah.
Now, you know, one of the things is living in this context, you have different ways within our cultures where monogamy was not the preferred way. So first of all, it could be marrying many wives. It was principally the man who would marry many wives. Brian has given another example, which were essentially siring relationships, because amongst the Kisi, amongst the Kalenjin as well, and also amongst the
Kikuyu,
there was a number of that kind of thing where if a woman is unable to bear children, she is allowed to marry, bring somebody else into that context, have that person bear children with either her husband or a clan member of her husband's family, and those children were considered hers. That's one expression. Amongst the Maasais, as an example, it was felt that over and above having a polygamous relationship, as a Maasai man, you should also have children with other women who are not your wives, because there was the belief that if something happens and your whole family is wiped out, your future, your progeny, your generations are assured by having a child outside there, maybe with a friend's wife and that kind of thing. And it was actually recognized, and it wasn't hidden, and it was known that so-and-so is so-and-so's child as far as that goes. So when we talk about monogamy and challenges to monogamy, or even keeping it within the marriage context, because many times it's not that people have an issue about having many wives. It's sometimes that these things arise only in the event of death. So it's almost like there was a hidden somebody somewhere. An important point to make is that there is a convergence at that point between death and property rights. Because you'll realize for somebody without assets, there won't be those fights.
Those issues don't come
up.
up.
If I don't have assets, if I'm a man of straw, there's nothing to fight about. But because there is an issue of assets, and this is a legal moment where I can stake my claim, so you find at the point of death, funeral arrangements, burial, that people then raise the stakes and say,
and the keyword normally is recognition. They want to be recognized.
Exactly. That's the point. And with technology and that kind of thing, you're hearing now increasing requests for not just does Mike look like this guy, are his ears like him. You'll actually now hear that let's do a DNA testing to establish whether this person is actually the child of so-and-so.
All right, Brian, you wanted to say something. And just a reminder that the phone lines are open, so if you'd like to participate via telephone call, the numbers are going to be displayed on your screen, and you're free to call and weigh in on what you think. Brian.
My learned senior Kamenchi has preempted what I was about to say. The entire construct of marriage, and that is the reason why the law attempts to regulate marriage, is because marriage exists for the sake of property rights.
Yeah, it's a financial institution.
It is a financial institution, as Shiro says.
Marriage.
Yeah, it's primarily a financial institution.
But one would argue that it's social. It's you're together for social reasons. I mean, it's.
Which is why I tell women who marry. Which is why I tell women who marry for love they're stupid. It's primarily a financial institution.
Wait. If you marry for love, you're stupid.
No, love only. Not say don't love your husband, but if love is the only reason you're married to this man.
But that's really throwing a spanner into the works, because is it just a financial contract?
Let me give you a contract.
I didn't say just, I said primarily. A financial institution.
Brian.
Take a very good example. If a gentleman or a lady passes on and their estate is in debt, nobody ever walks up and says, I was an estranged wife of this individual. I want to come and participate in the paying off of his debt.
Nobody wants to.
Nobody ever surfaces. But in the event that a gentleman or a woman dies and there's some substantial property left, then everybody runs to it. And this is why only those who are able to afford, proper and well-to-do living go through process of divorce. The poor don't go through the process of divorce. You just up and go. Because there is no stake to divide.
Wow. Okay. Shiro, maybe just explain further what you made as a statement that those who marry for love only are stupid, because that is a very strong statement.
I agree with it.
You agree with it?
I don't agree with it.
Okay, let me hear from
No,
Shiro first.
I didn't say don't love the person you're married
No, I'm not
to.
saying that, but
Yes,
I think you.
I said
yeah.
if love is the only reason you're with this person,
Okay.
what you are is dumb.
All right. I think let's
Because
substantiate. Yeah.
there are children that are going to be born into that
right.
union.
All right.
There are
Who are going to grow up in love.
Yes, but also love does not feed you. There are families that are coming together. There is such issues that you need to think through. And so primarily what you need to ask yourself before you get married is, number one, is this a person I can handle the worst with kindness? Like together we can handle the worst of life kindly. If the divorce comes to the end, will it be, or rather if the divorce comes to a place where we have no choice but to make acrimonious decisions, can we at the very least make them in kindness?
In kindness.
That's the number one question you need to ask, because primarily what you're getting is a business partner. We don't think about it like that. We think about it as you're getting a companion. We use religious terms. Even in church, when people are getting married, we use very religious terms, while forgetting that this is it's a primary social vehicle within which we are setting up the next generation for life. That's a financial institution.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll ask you to hold your thought,
okay.
Bwana Kamenchu, there, because I want us to take a break and just soak that in, because that's a lot of information right there, which is challenging how we have always thought and believed, maybe, and possibly just correcting that. So we're going to take a short break, but we continue with the conversation after the break.
This is KTN News.
Song of the hour. Just dial 699 and listen to top music on your phone. Dial 699 now.
I look at the monitors beeping and some are shutting down. And finally, on the 25th of September, everything went flat.
The boy could not be helped. I wouldn't have wanted him to continue suffering. So I had to let go.
The financial burden is so huge that it completely devastates families.
The patient has the emotional side of them. The patient has the psychological part.
I feel like this is a closure session because I get to know the side of the parents as a child who's lost a parent to cancer.
Behind every number is a patient, is a family, and people who've been affected by cancer. And that's our focus on Health Digest this month, where we look at the burden of cancer on those who've been left behind.
Africa is on the move, farming with tech and moving mobile money, turning trash into cash and finding our fortune online. So whether you're starting out on your own or budgeting for tomorrow, we are sharing inspiring ideas from across the continent and expert advice on how to navigate your world. For business news that's useful to you, get informed, get ahead with Africa Business from the BBC.
This is KTN News.
All right, and the discussion has carried on even on the break, and I wish I was recording that, but just to bring us back into context and where we were, and Shiro, allow me to quote what you have said and correct me if I'm wrong. You have mentioned and said that a marriage, if I understood you correctly, is almost a business agreement. What you're getting into is a business partnership, in a way. But we never look at it that way. Is that what you've said?
Yes, I can stand with that.
You can
I can die on that hill.
You can. So it's a partnership. It's a business partnership. Kamenchu, your thoughts on that? Do you agree it's a business partnership?
No, I don't. I think that certainly finances are one aspect of marriage. I think that finances are an important aspect of marriage. But to suggest that they are the primary reason for marriage, or that if anything else comes, such as love, and you say that that's the reason that you're marrying, that it means that, as Shiro has put it, that you are dumb, I don't agree with that. Okay. And during the break, I pointed out to her that by that statement, she has disqualified certain people from marriage. She's disqualified the 21-year-old, for example, who is straight out of university, either lady or man, and does not have means as far as that goes. Because when you're talking about a business partnership, if there is no capital, there is no business. She has disqualified, in that same statement, she's disqualified any person who is a refugee, unable to earn within the Kenyan context, and we have a significant number of them. I think marriage is primarily a companionship relationship, because what puts marriage apart at the end of the day is the separation from that companionship. If we look at it from what ends marriage, it's not that we have disagreed on finances, because disagreements sometimes arise. It's not that we are operating. It's not that we are operating finances separately, because we know people who have settled that that's the way, as that kind of thing. What primarily dissolves a marriage is staying apart, and that's, I think, that's a Christian tradition that talks about.
For you, what you're saying is that what primarily dissolves a marriage is what? The fact that the relationship has gone sour and had nothing to do with property. Yet we know that many people go separate ways, maybe because either they can't agree on finances.
But we do know people who actually are able to settle property matters and go their separate ways within a marriage context without that. So essentially they are able to separate their property matters and then go their separate ways.
But Kamenchu, in the years of practice as a psychologist, I've had maybe now we are at 334 couples represented either by one partner or two partners in my practice as a therapist. And I can very confidently say that the number one thing people fight about is money. By the time you're saying that the dissolution of a marriage happens because of separation, that's a legal aspect, because you go to court and you say we've been separated for X number of months. However, by the time that separation is happening, they passed by my office. When they passed by my office, they were complaining about money.
Okay, and I want us to hear, take a call from Anthony. Let me take a call from Anthony in here. Anthony from Bomet, what do you have to say regarding this conversation? Your question or comment?
Kitonga.
Yes, sir.
Nimesikia mjadala na mimi nataka nichangie. Ninakubaliana na Mr. Kamenyu kwamba marriage ama familia ni biashara. Kwa sababu kila mmoja ambaye ako kwa familia anachangia kujenga hiyo familia, anatumia resources. Nafasi yao as a resource, time as a resource, money as a resource. So mimi nakubaliana familia ni biashara.
Okay.
Na biashara lazima iwe legal.
Lazima iwe
legal.
Okay.
It should be legal. It should be registered. na ijulikane hii ni biashara ambayo inaendelea kama biashara yeyote ile.
Okay, asanti sana Anthony.
Nikikuja sasa kwa biashara, nikikuja sasa kwa familia. Ninakataa maneno ya wanawake ambao wanachipuka wanasema huyu alizaa mtoto na mimi. Mbona wanaume hawana hiyo jambo kusema? Kuna wanawake ambao wako single and are driving very heavy machines, V8, have rental houses na biashara mingi mahoteli, lakini hakuna wanaume wanasema mimi nilikuwa part of hiyo biashara. So wale wanawake ambao wanakuja baadaye kama mtu amekufa wanakuja baadaye wanasema nilikuwa part of this business, hakuna, kwa sababu tunataka kufuata sheria.
Haya. Sawa, asante sana Anthony. Let me hear your take on this, Brian, because we have a disagreement here.
Yes,
but we have Anthony kind of agreeing with Shiro that ni biashara.
Yes.
The only thing is that it needs legal terms.
Yes. Let me begin by saying, if you read the entire of our laws in the country that regulate the context of marriage, none of those bother with talking about emotions. The law does not attempt to regulate emotions, save for criminalizing adultery or making adultery an offense. But on the other hand, the property rights questions in marriage are extensively dealt with under law. And this is where the entire conversation about Mpango wa Kando comes from. Although emotions is the root cause of marriage, eventually the selection and decision to settle down into a monogamous marriage or otherwise, perhaps if you also elect to go polygamous, the property rights questions are what the law then takes extensive effort to regulate. Yeah?
So are you then agreeing with Shiro that this is, I don't want to call it purely a business transaction, but it's primarily.
And to answer him when he talked of 21-year-olds and refugees, number one, people are not refugees forever. Okay, some people are refugees forever. However, that doesn't disqualify that the rest of, because you're arguing from the premise of, because there is this small unit of people, then your entire hypothesis must fall apart. Not exactly. And people are not 21 and broke forever. I mean, where we grew up, because we grew up around the same hood, where we grew up, we know a lot of people who the wife was 17 and she didn't finish Form 4, and the dude was 19, and they finally, by the time we were meeting them, they were in their 40s and rich.
Yes.
Those are now things to think about.
Right.
So either way, like Mr. Anthony from Bomet said, either way, when we are in this union, what we are doing is we're building. What are we building? We're building legacy. We're building relationships. We're building connection. We're building we're building a family. We're building wealth together. We're building a base for the children to have a, if other people's children are starting at step 0, ours can start at step 20. When these things that are being built, how are they being built?
It's all financial. All right, let me take a call from Sami Nyamwea in Mombasa. Good morning, Sami, to your question or comment, please, and try and keep it brief. Go ahead.
I'd like to speak on this matter of rights and inheritance of the child and maybe other relatives who might be there when somebody passes away. Is it not true that if there's right to inherit or to be included in wealth and other resources, then there should also be a right to also inherit debts, because there are some people die in debt, some people die in problems. Is there a right for those people who are ready to enjoy, to be ready also to get the pain of paying, who are ready to enjoy the wealth, to be ready to pay the debts and other problems that the dead person might have had? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much, Sami. And maybe this is a legal context, and maybe Kamenchu.
Yeah, all right.
Is there a right to inherit debt? I mean, if you're inheriting property, then you might as well inherit the debt. And maybe we incurred this debt together, especially as Mpango wa Kando. Maybe when you pull up pesa mingi.
We need to understand the context in which succession takes place in this country.
Yes.
First of all, you have two broad categories of succession in this country. You have what you call testate succession, which is basically succession where you have a will. and then intestate succession, which is succession or inheritance where you do not have a will. Now, in both of those, they are dealing with the assets and liabilities of the deceased person, the sum total of which is what we call in law the estate of the deceased person. Now, remember, his liabilities are his liabilities. If I pass on today and I owed somebody money, that person is limited to the assets that I have at a particular instance in terms of the estate for him to recover. If I had entered into a sale agreement for property with Shiro, as an example, she can only then enforce it as against my estate, not the individuals who are benefiting, but against the wider estate. Now, because of that, one then needs to look at it from people taking a view. Essentially, when I am staking a claim, I am taking the view that I think after all your liabilities are settled, there will be some good surplus at the end of the day. The second category is what we call those items that are outside the purview of succession. A good example is insurance benefits. Insurance benefits actually loop or they go over the succession process, because in insurance benefits you basically make a nomination. You say, in the event of my death, so and so is the one who will benefit, and those amounts can be quite high. I've heard of amounts 50, 60 million where I've taken out a life insurance policy, and what happens is that when I pass away, the person whom I have nominated, the insurance company pays direct to them, and that does not go through the succession process. It will not be reckoned when people are coming as creditors against the estate. As far as it goes directly. So when people are staking a claim, they're staking a claim saying that I think the net estate of this person looks good. I think that there are other benefits which I could get, and I suspect, like especially where you have structure, whether it's in private sector or public sector, where you have things like insurance policies in place, you have fairly high amounts that are provided for, where one gets as a nomination.
All right, I want us to look at a few things, but let me take a call from Dr. Silas Lagat in Kisumu. But when I come back, Brian, I'd also want us to just look very briefly at how you go about writing a will, because that's one of the areas that many Kenyans fail. But let's take a call from Dr. Silas Lagat in Kisumu. Dr. Silas.
Hello. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, I wanted to comment about the issue of marriages in Kenya. The issue of marriage. So my take is, as Kenyans, we live two lives. We live an eaten life and a practical life. So we live a theoretical life and a practical life. You look, for example, if you take cases like, if you look at the way we live in our lives, especially the issues of, okay, let's take, for example, hotels. The occupancy during the day is 80%, and during the night is 20%. So who are these ones sleeping during the day? So we need, as Kenyans, to have a culture which we live what we say. So that is my take according to issues of marriages. So most of the marriages institutions are just theoretical. They are not practical at all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Silas Lagat. Wow, most of the marriage institutions we have are theoretical rather than practical. I guess, Shiro, I'll come back to you on that, because you did allude to something to that extent in terms of marriage in the context of the way we are. But the will.
Yes.
What's the process, and why do most of us shy away from that?
Well, first of all, I don't think people shy away from writing wills. It's just, to a large extent, an awareness. People are not aware that, first of all, there exists the construct of a document called a will. Is it important? Absolutely. And I would say it's very important, because a will helps in a very extensive way to solve issues that will happen after your death before you pass on. Yep. So you're able to administer what my senior calls your estate before you pass on. You understand? Mm-hmm. So it is important to write a will, so that upon your death, then you don't leave people in the afterlife, in the life that you've left, fighting over your property, who takes what, who takes the other. How should you go about writing a will? I implore you to employ the services of an advocate. Just the same way you have a family doctor, it's important to have a family advocate. Someone with whom your family affairs, your business affairs could be handled elsewhere, but your family affairs, at least there should be an advocate who you constantly bounce ideas upon. So for instance, you walk into the office of my senior Kamenchuk, or you walk into my office and you constantly run through your family affairs. That way, first of all, I become competent in your affairs. Yeah. And a will, of course, you can elect to write it once and for all when you see that you're in advanced age and you're headed towards imminent death.
Sorry to interrupt you, Brian, yes. But I'm told that we have Embrace Kenya women marching to KICC in support of the handshake. So we'd just like to take live images of that as we tease for you what is going to be coming up. And you can see it there at the bottom of this. Oh, there you go. They're marching to KICC in support of the handshake. And of course, this is coming up, and we're going to be giving you more details of that. Right, and that's Embrace Kenya women. They are marching to KICC where they're going to make their submissions to the BBI, that's the Building Bridges Initiative. And as you've heard from the song, Wamama Msilale. I'm sure on News Center there's going to be more details of that, but they are marching to KICC to have their submissions for the BBI group to get at least what the women have to say. But I want us to now just get to the conclusion of this discussion, but you are finishing off on the will. Maybe just to cap it up on the process and maybe whatever you're not said regarding writing a will. Yes.
Before I make my comments, I wish there was as much energy in discussing developmental issues in this country. But nonetheless, that's a discussion for another day. Yes. For them, maybe it's also just a business contract. They're working.
Of course. She was words, not yours.
It's very important to write a will because it expresses your wishes, which then those of us left behind are almost duty-bound to fulfill. And as I was saying, it's important to hire the services of an advocate to write this document for you. Of course, you can do it by yourself. But the reason why I say you must hire an advocate is because in law there is what we describe as the essential validity of a will, which questions perhaps as a layman, as a normal Kenyan, you might not be able to appreciate, but your advocate, of course, will. So you outline to your advocate what you own, I mean, as in simple terms, what you own where, and how you'd wish for them to devolve upon your death. Who gets what? You might even elect then to say that let all of it go to charity. Go to charity. It's within your right. But always remember that a will still, upon your death, stands the test that a court of law will then have to put it against, and which is what my senior was calling tested succession, where we're going to court and saying that this individual who has since passed on left a will, and the will is put before court so that the court can then test the document if it passes the minimum standard that the law puts for a will. But of course, remember, anybody who feels excluded from the will can still come before court and then say, I think I should have had stake in this estate. I was not given any, please rope me in. Okay. Yes. Kamenchu, I'll come to you for your closing comments, but Shiro, maybe just your closing remarks and what as a society we should embrace and expect, because you've made it very clear that it is primarily a business contract. We may not want to look at it that way, but that might be the fact.
I think as a society, it's time we started embracing that aspect, that it's primarily a business, it's primarily a financial institution. And so when we're looking at, number one, who we are marrying, not so much about do they have money or do they not, but to sit down and ask ourselves, in the event that we get very little money, how can we handle it? In the event that we have a lot of money on our hands, is this a person I can still handle both situations with grace and kindness? Because it's picking your business partner well, so to speak. And then to embrace also the idea that there is no shame in laying your cards on the table. If you have 20 children with other women and you now want to get married, let it be known very early on that you have 20 children with other women. The person who will probably want to marry a man with 20 children with other women is the person that man would be able to handle such situations with grace and, they'd be able to now handle the situations with grace and kindness together. Otherwise, you really are setting yourself and your children up for a very difficult time in life.
All right, Kamenchu, your closing comments. You have 20 seconds. We're out of time.
Oh, yeah, okay, very well. First, I see you've become Shiro's disciple. I want to say marriage is not a contract or covenant for money and means. It's a contract covenant with prospects of money and means. It's important. It's not the only thing. But I think in terms of this particular discussion, I think the word we should talk about is estate planning. And I think Brian touched on it when he talked about wills. I think it's important to put your affairs in order. A will is one such document where we do that, but there are other measures that people can take to ensure that when they are away or when they have passed away, they reduce. You can't totally eliminate, you can reduce the chances of dispute. Finally, of course, as counsel, as lawyers, I think we bear a responsibility towards our clients when dealing with these matters, these sensitive matters in the times of death, to realize that there's a future, there's a child involved, and even as we conduct ourselves, find a way of doing it in a way that will honor both the person who's passed away and the people who are still.
Thank you very much. Kamenchu Kimathi, who's a lawyer, Shiro Ngige, who's a psychologist, and Brian Odongo, a lawyer as well. Thank you for joining us this morning on Black and White. Well, that's where we wind up the show, and we're really out of time, so I'll just say goodbye. Thank you for watching. Do have yourselves a great day. God bless.